Here's a number that should genuinely bother you. If you're under 35 right now, your generation's typical net worth, adjusted for inflation, is almost exactly the same as it was for someone under 35 back in 1989. 37 years. Same starting point. Somewhere along the way, an entire set of instructions everyone was handed. Work hard. Save a little every month. Buy a house. Retire comfortably. Quietly stopped adding up to the result it used to promise. Nobody sent out a memo. Nobody announced the rules had changed. They just did. And most people are still playing by a version of the game that ended years ago. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what changed, why the strategy that gets someone their first $100,000 is almost the opposite of the strategy that gets them to $1 million, and why some of the wealthiest people alive still act like they're worried about money. If any part of that sounds like it contradicts everything you were taught, good. Stick around, because that contradiction is exactly what we're unpacking. Quick ask before we dive in. If this is the kind of thing you want to actually understand, instead of just hear repeated, subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments which of these 4 ideas surprises you most by the end. Alright, let's get into it. Start with the economy itself, because that's the ground everything else is standing on. And that ground has genuinely shifted. The old advice assumed a fairly stable world. A job stayed a job for decades. A dollar saved today bought roughly the same amount next year. A house was a starter purchase, not a decade-long savings goal on its own. None of those assumptions really hold anymore. Automation and AI aren't a future threat anymore. They're already reshaping which skills actually get paid a premium and which ones are quietly becoming commodities. Inflation didn't just make things more expensive temporarily, it reset the baseline cost of living permanently higher, while wages, for a huge share of workers, crept up far slower. And globalization means capital now moves anywhere on Earth, searching for the best return, in seconds, while most people's income is still tied to one job, in one place, priced by local competition. Put those 3 forces together, and work hard and save stops being bad advice. It just stops being sufficient advice. It's necessary, not enough. Which is a very different thing, and almost nobody makes that distinction out loud. So if the old playbook isn't enough anymore, what actually replaces it? Here's where it gets interesting, because the honest answer isn't one strategy. It's several, and they change depending on where you're actually starting from. This is the part almost every finance video skips completely. The path to your first $100,000 and the path from there to $1 million aren't the same journey. They're not even close. Getting to that first $100,000 is mostly a savings rate problem. Your income is probably still your biggest asset at this stage, so the entire game is about maximizing how much of it you keep, minimizing high-interest debt, and getting money into the market early enough that time can start doing quiet, unglamorous work in the background. But somewhere after that first 100,000, the math flips. Once you've got real capital working alongside you, the return on that capital starts mattering more than the return on your labor. A 10% gain on $100,000 is $10,000, more than most raises most people will ever get in a single year. At that point, the goal quietly shifts from earn and save aggressively to protect and compound patiently, and trying to keep using the first strategy after it stopped being the bottleneck is exactly why so many people feel stuck, even as their number keeps technically going up. Which brings us to something that sounds almost contradictory at first, but it's the exact hinge this whole video turns on. Old money. The kind that survives generations instead of evaporating in one, has never really operated on hustle culture logic, and it's not because those families are lazier or luckier. It's because they learned something the rest of the culture keeps forgetting. Looking rich and being wealthy are often opposites, funded from the same paycheck. Status spending, the car, the watch, the constant vacations posted online, pulls money out of the one place it could have kept growing and converts it into something that depreciates the moment you drive it home or the trip ends. Genuine old money behavior looks almost boring by comparison. Ownership over rental, patience over timing, capital preservation over chasing the next hot thing. It's a strategy built by people who've already watched at least one market cycle wipe out families who confused a big income with actual security. And that phrase, a big income confused with actual security, is exactly where the final and honestly the most important piece of this fits. Here's the trap almost nobody warns you about, because it sounds so counterintuitive that it seems wrong the first time you hear it. Earning more money doesn't automatically make you wealthier. Sometimes it barely moves the needle at all. Every raise you get, quietly, invites a matching upgrade. The nicer apartment now that you can technically afford it, the newer car. The vacations that used to be occasional treats becoming a normal part of the calendar. None of these decisions feel reckless in the moment. Each one feels earned. But every upgrade locked in isn't a one-time cost. It's a new recurring bill, every single month, whether or not next year's income holds steady. Layer taxes and inflation on top of that, and the picture gets even less forgiving. A raise gets taxed before it ever reaches your hands. Whatever's left has to fight inflation just to maintain the same purchasing power it had last year. By the time lifestyle inflation takes its cut too, a genuinely impressive raise can end up adding almost nothing to your actual net worth. The number that measures what you keep, not what you're paid. That's the whole distinction underneath everything we've covered today. Income is what lands in your account. Wealth is what's left standing after everything else has taken its cut. And then, what that leftover amount is actually doing while you're not looking at it. So here's how all four of these pieces actually fit together into one picture. The economy changed the rules of the game. Your net worth stage determines which strategy the current version of the game actually rewards. Old money principles tell you what to do with the surplus once you have one. Protect it and let it compound quietly instead of spending it into visibility. And the income trap is the warning about the one mistake that can undo all three. Mistaking a bigger paycheck for the finish line instead of just another input that still has to be managed on purpose. None of this requires a lucky break, a huge salary, or some strategy nobody's ever heard of. It requires understanding which stage of the game you're actually in, and refusing to keep playing by instructions written for a different economy than the one you're standing in right now. If this reframed how you're thinking about your own money, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a like, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments. Which of these four ideas is going to change something for you first? Because the old rules didn't fail because they were wrong. They failed because the world they were written for doesn't exist anymore. The new rules aren't more complicated. They're just finally honest about the game you're actually playing.